Let me make the songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to start like a battle cry wherever they are sung. Let me make the songs for the weary amid life's fever and fret, till heart shall relax their tensions and careworn brows forget. Not for the clashing of sabers, for carnage nor for strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of men with more abundant life. Let me sing for little children before their footsteps stray, sweet anthems of love and duty to float our life's highway. A world so worn and weary needs music pure and strong to hush the jangled and discords of sorrow, pain, and wrong. Music to soothe all our sorrows, till war and crime shall cease, and the hearts of men grow tender, girdle the world with peace. Let me make the songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to start like a battle cry wherever they are sung. Let me make the songs for the weary amid life's fever and fret, till hearts shall relax their tensions and careworn brows forget.
Good morning, beloved in Christ. Welcome to worship at Central Square Congregational Church, United Church of Christ. We are a Christian community of people who are reaching out to our neighbors at home and abroad, sharing our faith and our resources. And no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're welcome here. Whether you are old or young, rich or poor, gay or straight, regardless of your ethnic identity or your country of origin or your political persuasion, you're welcome here and we celebrate you. I have a couple of announcements. One, today is a special day here at Central Square Church. Today we are offering the program The Year of Jubilee with our guest artists, soprano Brianna Robinson, our baritone and composer James T. Dargan, as well as speaker Kedrick Roy. A special thank you to them for leading us through this service today. This has been a really difficult time for a lot of people, especially given the new surge of virus going around. So we know that there are a lot of people watching at home who wish you could be here in person, but we want you to know that we see you and we are with you, and we are glad that you're here with us today. If you are watching from home, if you go to our church website, csccucc.org, you can follow along with the program by clicking on a link that says follow here to follow, or click here to follow along with our program today. Also, if you need anything at all, if you need someone to talk to, if you need someone to pray with, if you need a meal, anything at all, please reach out to myself, to one of our deacons, or to a member of the care team. You can call the church office at 508-697-6016 and reach any of us. And as always, we thank you for your donations and keeping the ministries of this community going. If you'd like to make a donation, you can visit again our website, csccucc.org, and there's a button right at the top that says Donate Now. Thank you all so much for your generosity and your donations as we've moved through this time of exceptional ministry. All right, and with that, let us begin our program with our congregational hymn.
The 1st of January, 1863, was a memorable day in the progress of American liberty and civilization. It was the turning point in the conflict between freedom and slavery. On this day, the formal and solemn announcement was made that thereafter, the government would be found on the side of emancipation. The proclamation changed everything. I shall leave it to the statesman, the philosopher, and the historian, the more comprehensive discussion of this document, and only tell how it touched me and those in like condition with me at the time. I was in Boston, and its reception there may indicate the importance attached to it elsewhere. An immense assembly convened in the Tremont Temple to await the first flash of the electric wires announcing the new departure. The occasion, therefore, was one of both hope and fear. Our ship was on the open sea, tossed by a terrible storm, wave after wave passing over us, and every hour was fraught with increasing peril. Whether we should survive or perish depended in large measure upon the coming of this proclamation. A line of messengers was established between the telegraph office and the platform of Tremont Temple, and the time was occupied with brief speeches. But speaking or listening to speeches was not the thing for which the people came together. The time for argument was past. It was not logic, but the trump of Jubilee, which everybody wanted to hear. We were waiting and listening as for a bolt from the sky, which should rend the fetters of 4 millions of slaves. We were watching, as it were, by the dim light of the stars for the dawn of a new day. We were longing for the answer to the agonizing prayers for centuries. Remembering those in bonds as bound with them, we wanted to join in the shout for freedom, in the anthem of the redeemed. By and by, Judge Russell went to one of the newspaper offices and obtained a slip containing the proclamation. I never saw such enthusiasm before. I never saw such joy before. Men and women, young and old, were up. Hats and bonnets were in the air. And we had 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln and 3 cheers for about everybody else. Some prayed and some sang, and finally we adjourned from the place to meet in the Reverend Mr. Graves' church, that good old soul, and we continued greeting them until 3 o'clock. They were shouting and saying, "Glory, hallelujah, old John Brown, marching on, and blow ye the trumpet, blow," till we got such a state of enthusiasm that almost anything seemed to be witty. There was evidently no disposition on the part of the meeting to criticize the proclamation, nor was there with anyone at first. At the moment, we saw only its anti-slavery side, but further and more critical examination showed it to be extremely defective. It was not a proclamation of liberty throughout the land unto the inhabitants thereof, such as we had really hoped it would be, but was one marked by the discriminations and reservations. Its operation was confined within certain geographical and military lines. It only abolished slavery where it did not exist and left it intact where it did exist. It was a measure apparently inspired by the low motive of military necessity, and by so far as it was so, it would become inoperative and useless when military necessity should cease. There was much said in this line, and much was narrow and erroneous. For my own part, I took the proclamation, first and last, for a little more than it purported, and saw in its spirit a life and a power beyond the letter. Its meaning to me was the entire abolition of slavery, wherever the evil could be reached by the federal arm, and I saw that its moral power would extend much further. It was, in my estimation, an immense gain to have the war for the Union committed to the extinction of slavery, even from a military necessity. The effect of the proclamation abroad was highly beneficial to the loyal cause. Disinterested parties could now see in it a benevolent character. It was no longer a mere strife for territory and domination, but a contest of civilization against barbarism. There are certain great national acts which, by their relation to universal principles, properly belong to the whole human family, and Abraham Lincoln's proclamation on the 1st of January, 1863, is one of these acts. Henceforth shall the day take rank with the 4th of July. Henceforth it becomes the date of a new and glorious era in the history of American liberty. Henceforth it shall stand associated in the minds of men with all the stately steps of mankind from the regions of error and oppression, which have lifted the trial by poison and fire to the trial by jury, from the arbitrary will of the despot to the sacred writ of habeas corpus, from abject serfdom to absolute citizenship. It will stand with every distinguished event which marks any advance made by mankind from the thraldom and darkness of error to the glorious liberty of truth. I believe in the millennium, the final perfection of the race, and the hail of this proclamation, though wrung out under the goading lash of a stern military necessity, as one reason of the hope that is in me. Men may see it only a military necessity. To me, it has a higher significance. It is a grand moral necessity.
As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, but Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will have only to keep still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to go forward, but you lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites may go into the sea on dry ground." When the waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and his servant Moses. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and might, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea. He picked officers, were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew your adversaries. You sent out your fury. It consumed them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the water piled up. The flood stood up in a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the soil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. You blew your wind, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your steadfast love, you led the people whom you redeemed. You guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples heard, they trembled. Pangs seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. Trembled seized the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. Terror and dread upon them. By the might of your arm, they became still as a stone until your people, O Lord, passed by, until the people whom you acquired passed by. You brought them in and planted them on the mountain of your possession, the place, O Lord, that you made your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, that your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. When the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his chariot drivers went into the sea, the Lord broke back the waters of the sea upon them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and with all the women went out after with their tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he thrown into the sea.
Triumph By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? What to the slave is the 4th of July? What to the slave is the 4th of July? A day that reveals that your celebration is a sham. National greatness, your sounds of rejoicing, your denouncing of tyrants, your shouts of liberty and equality, your prayers and hymns, sermons and thanksgivings on their fraud. A thin veil to cover up crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. There is no nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. By the rivers, by the waters of Babylon, we sat down. We wept when we remembered Zion, for they that carried us away captive required of us a song, saying, "Sing us the songs of Zion." But how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is rightful owner of his own body? How should I look, dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom? Speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively. To do so would be to make myself ridiculous. There is no one beneath the canopy of heaven who does not know slavery is wrong. So I say, and let every heart join in saying it. Godspeed the all, the glorious hour, and none on earth shall access besides a lordly power, until that year day arise. With head and heart and hand I'll strive to break the rod and rend the jive, for spoiler of his prey deprive, and never from my chosen post, whatever peril or the cost be driven. So witness have, so witness have, so witness have.
Spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Sabbath for the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in their yield. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that a period of 7 weeks of years gives 49 years. Then you shall have the trumpet sounded loud on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. You shall have the trumpet sounded all throughout your land. And you shall hallow the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall return, every one of you, to your property, and every one of you to your family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow or reap the aftergrowth, or harvest the unpruned vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat only what the field itself produces. In this year of Jubilee, you shall return, every one of you, to your property. If any who are dependent on you become so impoverished that they sell themselves to you, you shall not make them serve as slaves. They shall remain with you as hired or bound laborers. They shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children with them shall be set free from your authority. They shall go back to their own family and return to their ancestral property. For they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves are sold. You shall not rule over them with harshness, but shall fear your God.
Could we trace the record of every human heart, the agitation of every immortal soul, perhaps we would find no man so imbruted and degraded that we could not trace the word liberty, either written in the living characters upon the soul or hidden away in some nook or corner of the heart. The law of liberty is the law of God and is antecedent to all human legislation. It existed in the mind of the deity when he hung the first world upon its orbit and gave it liberty to gather light from the central sun.
Oh, say, do you hear at the dawn's early light the shrieks of those bondsmen whose blood is now streaming from the merciless lash, while unbound in sight, with its stars mocking freedom, is fitfully gleaming. Do you see those there? Do you know every star of the whip of the driver, trace shadows of gold, and the city doth our star-spangled banner yet wave. All alone under the home of one rain.
America is more our country than that of the whites. We have enriched it with our blood and tears. The greatest riches in all America have arisen from our blood and tears. And will they drive us from our property and homes, which we have earned with our blood? They must look sharp, or this very thing will bring swift destruction upon them.
Shall we ne'er have
Till the day when this freedom shall stand, the
name to blow under matchless oppression?
shall liberty shows in every true light.
one man may rightfully make another his slave, and I will no longer subscribe to the Declaration of Independence. Convince me that liberty is not the inalienable birthright of every human being of whatever complexion or clime, and I will give you that instrument of consuming fire. I do not know how to espouse freedom and slavery together.
My country, 'tis for thee, dark land of slavery, for thee I weep. Long will a slave aside, and where he toiled and died, to serve our tyrant's pride, for thee I weep.
The longest way might have its close. The gloomiest night will wear on to a morning.
Spirit of free men, awake, no trees with slavery make thy deadly foe. In fair skies dressed, too long hast thou caressed the serpent in thy breast, bowing him low.
They boast that America is the cradle of liberty. If it is, I fear they have wrought the child to death.
Ye sons of freemen, wake to sadness.
What spirits bid you rise?
Aliens all our days in madness. In bitter cries.
Say, sir, in your madness, that you own the sun, the stars, and the moon, but do not say that you own a man endowed with the soul that shall live immortal when sun and moon and stars have passed away.
Thus men whose hearts now bleed with anguish,
Yes, trembling slaves in freedom's land.
endure the lash nor raise a hand.
Snakes beneath the whip-cord languish.
Pity on the slave.
Take courage from God's word.
They are these captives shall be free.
I carry no weapon. The Lord will preserve me without weapons. I feel safe even in the midst of my enemies, for the truth is powerful and will prevail.
Liberty can man or find, can oversee quench the flame, can dungeons burnt or not confine thee, or that's the heaven's spirit tame, or that's the heaven's spirit tame. Too long the slave has grown to be willing, the party's heartless tyrant wield. Yet freedom not my sword or shield, for with men's hearts they are availing.
day when slavery shall be no more in this country, when we have blotted out the system of wrong and made the United States in fact and in truth what it was in theory, the land of the free and home of the brave.
Let the starry banner wave. Lo, for the millions he perished all to save. Freedom reigns today. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Freedom reigns
Well, good morning, church. It's such an honor to speak with you all today about the subject of Jubilee. As Pastor Beth mentioned, in the Jewish tradition, the word Jubilee represents a public expression of joy, emancipation, and restoration. According to Leviticus 25, God decreed to the Israelites that every seventh year should be a sabbatical year. During the seventh year, people would enjoy the blessings of the harvest they reaped the previous year, that is, the sixth year, and it would be enough to last them all the way through the ninth year. Therefore, Jubilee is a reminder that God blesses us for trusting Him with our periods of rest. In addition, Jubilee represents a celebration that happened every 50 years in which debtors would be released from their debts or mortgages and would have their land returned to them. Most importantly for my talk today, Jubilee meant that servants and slaves would be released from bondage. Abolitionists like Frederick Douglass loved to trumpet the social and spiritual gifts of Jubilee, even if the abolition of slavery did not seem like a reality throughout most of their lifetimes. As a child in the 1820s, Douglass asked himself why black people had been slaves in America. He wondered if their enslavement would last forever. This was a question, he says, that reached the most silent chambers of his soul. How long, he asks, how long, oh, how long shall we be slaves? Decades later, during the Civil War, in December 1862, Douglass delivered a stirring speech entitled "The Day Jubilee Comes," which began to answer some of the questions that he had been asking throughout his childhood. Douglass gave the speech just days before President Abraham Lincoln would issue the Emancipation Proclamation, the decree that declared enslaved people living in rebel states to be free. Douglass's short address, which fills less than 3 typewritten pages, contained little in the way of celebrating the content of Lincoln's emancipation. He said that that would better be reserved for the soaring language of poetry and song. Douglass, instead, in this speech, contemplates the role and responsibilities that Americans must bear after enslaved people become free, following the Day of Jubilee. As the Civil War raged into its second year, Douglass did not doubt that Lincoln's forthcoming prohibition against slavery in the rebel states would soon lead to the abolition of the institution across all states in the Union as well. And we heard this in the speech that I read near the beginning of the program. Even so, Douglass writes in his Jubilee speech, quote, This is no time for the friends of freedom to fold their hands and consider their work at an end. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. But what does it mean to remain eternally vigilant, even in the face of certain Jubilee? Abolitionists such as David Walker, William Lloyd Garrison, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Frederick Douglass, and everyday people like you and me should understand that we should not understand eternal vigilance to mean that no matter how well things appear to be going in our lives, we need to always be mindful of the people that our success tends to mask from view. So he's saying that even if things are great for us, what happens to the people that we can't see? In anticipation of our Jubilee, our promotion, our new job, our home renovation, our relaxing Sunday evenings, we might ask ourselves who and what plight our good fortune obscures from our sight. We must remain eternally vigilant, even in the midst of our joy. Douglass was masterful at applying this ethos. He writes that, quote, even after slavery has been legally abolished in this country, and this country has reached the condition of comparative peace, there will still remain an urgent necessity for the benevolent activity of the men and women who oppose slavery from high moral conviction. A true abolitionist does not merely seek an end to slavery, but rather to continue working to end the extension of injustices that Douglass rightly predicted would continue to impede our progress as a nation. But what is this benevolent activity of eternal vigilance, and how can we pursue it together? How can we be modern-day abolitionists in 2022? If you're not a person of color, how can you best stand with people in marginalized groups? 100 years after Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr. provides a model for benevolent activity through embracing what he calls unenforceable laws. While enforceable laws depend on following a written legal code and are upheld by police and other agencies, unenforceable laws concern the unwritten legal codes made up of our personal attitudes, opinions, and social customs. This means that you could go 100 miles per hour down the freeway and you've broken an enforceable law, and you'll likely be punished to its fullest extent, and rightly so. However, if you refuse to smile at an immigrant or a person of color, if you treat them badly, or if you ignore their plight, you are violating an unenforceable law of respecting the dignity of fellow humans. The written law has nothing to say about that. This is why racism remains such a thorny and persistent problem in our society. Even though written laws are slowly changing, the unwritten attitudes, customs, and practices that maintain discriminatory inequities have remained in place. King provides another model for benevolent activity through what he calls dangerous unselfishness. He implores us to embody the position of the Good Samaritan and to be concerned with people who are hurting, regardless of the danger it may pose to our comfort, our social position, or even our lives. To be dangerously unselfish means that when we see injustices, we need to ask ourselves not what happens to me and my family if I stand against them, but rather what will happen to those who are not in a position to defend themselves if I don't speak up for their benefit. Following the examples of Douglas and King, we too need to think about the ways we could take part in benevolent activity by cultivating a kind of dangerous unselfishness, even in anticipation of our Jubilee. We need to foster what Peruvian theologian Gustavo Gutierrez calls a preferential option for the poor and oppressed. We need to always be thinking about how we can go out of our way to show folks kindness in our workplaces, churches, community meetings, and grocery stores. We can't be afraid to nod and smile. Our gesture may be appreciated even if it's not acknowledged and returned. In this way, we can begin to renew a spirit of what King called the beloved community of mutual respect, admiration, and love. A third way we might engage in benevolent activity is by being what Dr. King calls creative and active in our solutions to social problems. To make this more concrete, if you're a songwriter, you can write songs of encouragement, lament, or inspiration to express love for people made in the image of God, which is to say, all people. If you're a student, how can you get more involved in your community and use your time and your skills to benefit those who might need them? If you're an artist, how can you use your medium to bring attention to injustices or to advocate on behalf of the poor and oppressed? If you're a successful business leader, how can you use your time of Jubilee to bless and encourage others? If you work in construction, what would it look like to organize a group of friends to serve the folks of Bridgewater who could use your expertise? What I'm suggesting is that you can start something in this community today, because your contribution will count, no matter its scope or scale. You may not influence presidents like Frederick Douglass did, or lead civil rights movements like King. You may not be as graceful as Mother Teresa or as gifted as Gandhi. You may not arrange a soaring musical score like Julia or reach the heavenly notes of Brianna or James, but your life is a gift, and you need to use your benevolent activity and dangerous unselfishness to help make this church, your community, and our country more empathetic, compassionate, and just for everyone. Let's celebrate our next Jubilee with these commitments in mind as we remember the vision of Frederick Douglass and his abolitionist collaborators right now in 2022. Thank you.
Philadelphia, 8th month, 30th, 1835. Respected friend, I can hardly express to thee the deep and solemn interest with which I have viewed the violent proceedings of the last few weeks. Although I expected opposition, yet I was not prepared for it so soon. It took me by surprise, and I greatly feared abolitionists would be driven back in the first onset and thrown into confusion. So fearful was I that though I clung with unflinching firmness to our principles, yet I was afraid of even opening one of thy letters, lest I should see some indications of compromise, some surrender, some palliation. The ground upon which you stand is holy ground. Never, never surrender it. If you surrender it, the hope of the slave is extinguished, and the chains of his servitude will be strengthened 100-fold. But let no man take your crown, and success is as certain as the rising of tomorrow's sun. But remember, you must be willing to suffer the loss of all things, willing to be the scorn and reproach of professor and profane. You must obey our great master's injunction. Fear not them that kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. You must, like apostles, count not your lives dear unto yourselves, so that you may finish your course with joy.
When the lights blow out for thee and me, and the black comes in with a sweep, I wonder, will it mean life again or sleep? You will come back someday, somehow. But if it will be bright or black, I cannot tell. I only know you will come back. 'Twas not the spring with fragrant pack, return unto the orchard bough. Do not the birds retrace their track? All things return, all things return. Someday the glow of quickening dreams will pierce your lack, and when you know I wait as now, you will return.
My mind has been especially turned toward those who are standing in the forefront of the battle. And the prayer has gone up for their preservation, not the preservation of their lives, but the preservation of their minds in humility and patience, faith, hope, and charity. That charity which is the bond of perfectness. If persecution is the means which God has ordained for the accomplishment of this great end, emancipation, then independence upon him for strength to bear it. I feel as if I could say, let it come. For independence, it is my deep, solemn, deliberate conviction that this is the cause worth dying for. I say so from what I have seen and heard and known in a land of slavery, where rests the darkness of Egypt, and where is found the sin of Sodom. Yes, let it come.
The word of the Lord by night to the watching pilgrims came, and they sat by the seaside and filled their hearts with flame. God said, I'm tired of kings, I suffer them no more. Up to my ear the morning brings the outrage of the poor. Think ye I made this ball, a field of havoc and war, where tyrants great and tyrants small might harry the weak and poor? My angel, his name is Freedom. Choose him to be your king. He shall cut pathways east and west and fend you with his wing. Lo, I uncover the land which I hid of old time in the west, as the sculptor uncovers the statue when he has wrought his best. I show Columbia of the rocks which dip their foot in the seas and soar to the airborne flocks of clouds and the boreal fleece. I will divide my goods, call in the wretch and slave. None shall rule but the humble, and none but toil shall have. I will have never a noble, no lineage counted great. Fishers and choppers and plowmen shall constitute a state. Go, cut down trees in the forest and trim the straightest boughs. Cut down trees in the forest and build me a wooden house. Call the people together, the young men and the sires, the digger in the harvest field, hireling and him that hires. And here in a pine state house, they shall choose men to rule in every needful faculty, in church and state and school.
Lo now, if these poor men can govern the land and sea, and make just laws below the sun, as planets faithful be. And ye shall secure men, 'tis nobleness to serve. Help them who cannot help again. Beware from right to swerve. I break your bonds and masterships, and I unchain the slave. Free be his heart and hand henceforth as wind and wandering wave. I cause from every creature his proper good to flow. As much as he is and doeth, so much he shall bestow. But laying hands on another to coin his labor and sweat, he goes in pawn to his victim for eternal years in debt. Today unbind the captive, so only are ye unbound. Lift up a people from the dust, trump of their rescue sound. Pay ransom to the owner and fill the bag to the brim. Who is the owner? The slave is the owner and ever was. Pay him. North, give him beauty for rags and honor, south, for his shame. Nevada, coin thy golden crags with freedom's image and name. Up, and the dusky race that sat in darkness long, be swift their feet as antelopes and as behemoth strong. Come, east and west and north, by races as snowflakes, and carry my purpose forth, which neither halts nor shakes. My will fulfilled shall be, for in daylight or in dark, my thunderbolt has eyes to see his way home to the mark.
It's
Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. That is what he said. That is what Abraham Lincoln said. Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. He was born in Kentucky, raised in Indiana, and lived in Illinois. And this is what he said. This is what Abe Lincoln said. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. When standing erect, he was 6 feet 4 inches tall. And this is what he said. He said, "It is the eternal struggle between two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. It is the same spirit that says, 'You toil and work and earn bread, and I'll eat it,' no matter in what shape it comes. Whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his own nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another race, it is the same tyrannical principle. Lincoln was a quiet man. Abe Lincoln was a quiet and melancholy man. But when he spoke of democracy, this is what he said. He said, "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master." This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy. Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of these United States. is everlasting in the memory of his countrymen. For on the battleground at Gettysburg, this is what he said. He said that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. And that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.
Time of worship comes to a close, we depart giving a full measure of devotion to the work of justice seeking. In the name of our Creator God, amen.
Let me make the songs for the people, songs for the old and young, songs to stir like a bird to cry wherever they are sung, not for the clashing of sabers, for carnage, not for strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of men with more abundant life. Let me make the songs for the weary, amid life's fever and fret, till heart shall relax the tensions and care-worn brows forget. Let me sing for the little children before their footsteps stray, sweet anthems of love and duty, sweet anthems of love and duty, to float our lives highway, to float our lives I would sing for the poor and aged when shadows film their sight of the bright and restful mansions where they shall be